Hello, welcome to the first flipped segment of your class during the pandemic era. I hope that you all are staying healthy. I look forward to seeing you in our live session soon. I gotta say, the view that I have at my office here is a whole lot better than LAC. But hey, um, hopefully you have a nice view to look out on too. Unfortunately, I know a lot of professors' cats and dogs are about to become semi-famous right now. We no longer have a cute pet to entertain you during our online classes. This was ours. She passed away a couple of years ago. I like to call this piece Undercover Kitty. Instead, here is my emotional support pet. His name is Nicholas Bainham. I can take him with me when I travel. And bonus, he's never peed on the carpet. So, this video, we're going to discuss organizing for your memos. Specifically, we're talking about the outlining that you're going to do for that exercise that you're turning in on the discussion board. And we'll also talk about the number of creacs that you'll need. And I'll be doing some example outlining today in this YouTube video. So we're going from a disorganized mess to this. Yeah, I know, it's a room and a drawer. Kind of comparing apples and oranges, but hey, this is also an example of starting with the first bird and going one bird at a time. So, all right. So organizing. If you have more than one legal claim, each claim gets its own Roman numeral, and you subdivide within that. That's what you all you've already done this. You did this on your A5B assignment. All right, so we're going to go now to Word, and I'm going to show you an example of what I mean. So here we are in Word. Let's say you have multiple claims. When you have multiple claims, each one gets its own section. You all have done this before. You had your statute of limitations, legal issue, and your IIED legal issue, outrageous conduct. Let's say maybe, well, if I could learn how to spell. Let's say maybe you also had a torts case, and instead of these two issues, you were bringing a bunch of different torts claims. So maybe you had battery, assault, and also negligence. Each of those, you know what? I think I can do this way. Each of those gets their own section. Or maybe you have a criminal law case. I'm not a big criminal law person, but let's say maybe you've also got theft and fraud. Those are two different claims. They each get their own section. Well, sometimes a claim can have multiple elements. So in your memo, I directed you to analyze just outrageous conduct, that either we were satisfied regarding the other elements or someone else had already researched the claim. But let's say the call of the question was different. Remember, you always have to pay attention to the call of the question. Let's say instead I said determine whether there's a claim for IIED. Well, then you have multiple elements. You've got intent or recklessness. You've got outrageous conduct. You've got severe emotional distress and damages, all of which have to be met in order to satisfy a claim for IIED. So these are the 4 elements of IIED, and each would have to be met. Each time you have a single element, each element gets its own CREAC. So when you have an elements problem, each element gets its own CREAC. All right, you're at home watching this by yourself, so you can say out loud as many times as you want to commit it to memory. When I have an elements problem, each element gets its own CREAC. This will be important for your memo. So likewise, each of these battery, assault, negligence have multiple elements. So just as an example, negligence, we've got duty, we've got breach, causation, and damages. And causation is typically also further subdivided into actual or but for causation, as well as proximate causation. Each one of these would get their own CREAC. Because remember, when you have elements, each element gets its own CREAC. That could also be a Kahoot question. Now, elements are different from factors because with elements, each one has to be met to satisfy a claim. Whereas factors, you weigh them all against each other. Before we get to that though, sometimes you have alternative elements. So let's say you're in Texas and you're trying to prove termination of parental rights. You've got to prove, making it part of this criminal law claim, you've got to prove best interests, but you've also got to prove grounds. You only have to have one ground, one element, but there are alternates. There are different grounds under the Texas Family Code. So let's say you're going to try to prove endangerment grounds, mental health, and failure to pay child support. You would CREAC each of these if you were going to try to prove each one, hoping that one would stick. Now, I always advise go with the strongest claims that you have. So don't necessarily throw everything up against the wall, hoping it'll stick when you have alternatives like this. But just as with elements where you have to prove each of them, each has a CREAC, when you have alternative elements, anyone that you're trying to prove gets a CREAC. Now, sometimes an element can have factors. So, for instance, best interests is a factors test. It would be a single CREAC, and the application would be divided into factors. Likewise, you may remember from our IIED problem that was a factors test. You had those different factors listed in newbie, and you can divide your application into factors. But outrageous conduct itself, the element, would get a single CREAC. So, elements each get their own CREAC, whereas factors all go into one CREAC. So elements each get their own, whereas factors all go into one. All right, so once again, we've done the thing where the thing that appears first on the page, we're talking about last, and that's roadmaps. Because in order to figure out where your roadmaps are, you need to know what your subdivisions are. So here in this memo, we would have a discussion heading, and then after that, a roadmap, which is what you did. So what we're seeing here is that you have a roadmap before subdivisions. So each time before you subdivide, you have a roadmap. So this roadmap is saying we've got these 2 subdivisions ahead. Now, this time around, we also have these further subdivisions because we're doing each of those elements. So you would also place a roadmap here as well to indicate those subdivisions. Here, have a discussion heading, roadmap, which would summarize battery, assault, negligence. And then since negligence is further subdivided after that negligence heading, you would have a roadmap where you would have duty, breach, causation, damages. And then since CREAC is further subdivided, or not CREAC, since causation, sorry, that text just distracted me. Since causation is further subdivided, we would have a roadmap right before those two subdivisions as well. Now, remember though, in that A5A assignment that you had, you just had a single issue, and so there was no roadmap because there were no subdivisions. So you roadmap before you subdivide. You roadmap before you subdivide. Anytime you have a subdivision, you roadmap before you subdivide. Now, here's something else. Let's say, hint, hint, you had a memo problem where you had a single legal claim, such as IIED or perhaps something else, and that claim had multiple elements. You would have a roadmap and then a CREAC for each element. So if you had a single claim, like IIED, you would have a CREAC for each element and a roadmap before that element. Likewise, let's say you had a single claim for negligence. You would have a roadmap for each element and then a CREAC. Excuse me. A CREAC for each element. So likewise, if you had a single claim for negligence and multiple elements, you would have a CREAC for each element and a roadmap before all of your CREACs. So right there, we see roadmap. So remember, if sometime in the future you should happen to have a single legal claim with multiple different elements required to meet that claim, each element will get a CREAC, and before all of them, you'll have a single roadmap. All right, that's a wrap. That's all, folks. I look forward to seeing you during our regular class time next week.